She runs that office, and she's going to give an update on the MACEJ, the Michigan Environmental Advisory Council on Environmental Justice. And the third presentation will go over the Michigan Justice 40 Accelerated. That's an effort led by Office of Climate and Energy, Office of EJ Public Advocate, an outside group, Elevate Energy, and the Michigan EJ Coalition. And then finally, we're going to hear from a representative from LEO, Department of Labor and Economic Opportunity, on all the work that's being done around the Community and Worker Economic Transition Office that was created as part of the 2023 clean energy legislation. So one other thing I want to just add here, we have a bit of an ask of the state, the members, representatives from state departments. We're going to create a sub-cabinet of council members who are from state of Michigan departments and agencies. The plan is to meet monthly during the coming year. And the idea is to really engage on progress and updates and coordination of efforts across state government. In particular, the initiatives, the programs and initiatives that are related to the Comprehensive Climate Action Plan. Eagle leads on some of those, but many of them require, we're not the lead party or we're working in tandem. So it'll just be an opportunity to really bring some coordination to all those efforts. And I think that's it for me. Any questions for me? Okay, I'm going to hand it off to Tricia Treese at Great Plains Institute, hoping she's on the line there somewhere. She's going to give us a little help with facilitating the rest of the meeting.
Hi, I'm Tricia Treese. I am a senior policy manager at the Great Plains Institute. As Phil said, I'm here to help support this meeting and help facilitate discussion, bring things in the chat to attention and so forth. So with that, I'd like to introduce our first speaker, Corey Connolly, who will be giving us an update on Office of Climate and Energy My Healthy Climate Plan progress.
Great. Hey, everyone. Good to see some folks. I can't see everybody's video, but and good to see everybody who's here in person. I want to note Larry was here first.
Yeah, gold star for Larry.
Today.
Larry always gets the gold star. Right?
He does. So we're going to run through, this is the high level agenda. I'll run through a little bit on some of the updates for the Office of Climate and Energy, some of the upcoming CCAP work, some of the work we're doing to try and mobilize around the climate plan, and then some strategic initiatives that we've been undertaking to help make sure that we're getting the most resources in the state of Michigan to deploy the climate plan. And then, as Phil mentioned, we'll be hearing from other folks about some of the work around the justice pillar, and I'll provide a little bit of context for kind of why we've chosen to do that today and kind of how that fits into the broader work that we're going to be doing over the course of the year. Before doing that, so there's just a reminder of who I am, which I'm not confident many people needed. Here are some folks that might be new to you, and I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves to folks that are in the room. We've added a few folks here at the Office of Climate and Energy. Unfortunately, Dr. Joy Wong is not available at this moment because she's busy working on our Solar for All program and hearing from many, many stakeholders, is my understanding. But that is the first announcement, is that we've hired a Solar for All director. Dr. Joy Wong comes to us. Most recent position was at the Michigan Public Service Commission, heading the distribution system planning team. And she's immensely qualified and is going to be leading the work in planning for the Solar for All program. So I'm very excited to have her, and you'll be hearing from her on updates on that in the future at these meetings and more broadly. With that, I actually have the other two folks, Cheyenne Ghosh and Haley Hill, here in the office. So I'll just ask, or in the room, and I'll ask them to introduce themselves briefly.
Hi, everybody. My name is Haley Hill. I am the new Climate Office Coordinator for the Office of Climate and Energy. Very nice to meet all of you. Some of you I've met before. I live in Midland. I recently got my master's from Central Michigan University, and I'm very excited to be a part of the climate and energy space.
Volume is clean.
Yeah.
Hi everyone, I'm Sharon Ghosh. I'm the new Climate Research Officer. I'll be supporting OCE in developing the full greenhouse gas inventory report, which is due next year.
Great. So we're excited to have all three of these folks joining. It's fun to have a growing team. And obviously it's reflective of all the work that we all need to do together. One note, Haley Hill will now be the contact for council matters. That's transitioning away from Kimber France. Everybody knows and loves Kimber. She'll be around, but this is something that Haley's going to take on. So that'll be your point of contact. You'll see updates there, meeting minutes, things like that will start coming from her. So she'll be a familiar name and face. All right, so that's a bit of office logistics, super high level before we go into some of the office updates. Broadly, Michigan continues to lead on climate across state government, across a number of metrics. You can see the laundry list. We had to cut this down substantially, but some of the major highlights here are just the seeing that we're ranked 6th nationally for clean energy jobs, thanks to the new Midwest jobs report and clean energy jobs report and a few other reports that we've seen nationally. And then $26 billion of investment in Michigan's clean energy future through the Inflation Reduction Act. That's been an all-of-government approach to making sure we get the most climate dollars to the state of Michigan possible. And that is an ongoing effort. And as the director mentioned, also figuring out how we make sure that we retain those funds and get them out the door to make sure we're helping meet our targets and getting those resources to Michiganders. There are a number of other items there. We'll share the slide deck afterward for folks to peruse, but needless to say, lots going on across state government, not just what's going on within the Office of Climate and Energy or even just what's going on within EGLE. All right, okay, so taking a quick step back to make sure folks understand the context here. The Climate Pollution Reduction Grant Program, if folks will recall, 2-phase program, planning phase, implementation grant phase. Last time we talked, I think we talked about the fact that we got an implementation grant, one of 25 in the country, but we also still have our planning grant that we are working on, which is a 4-year grant that included a priority climate action plan, which we released earlier this year that was tied directly to that funding opportunity. And now we move to the comprehensive climate action plan, which is really just the next phase in the My Healthy Climate Plan. It's deepening some of the kind of strategic implementation of the climate plan, not meant to replace it, but to build from. So over the course of the next, several months, we'll be hosting a variety of input sessions on this kind of extended comprehensive climate action plan. Most notably, I would say the My Healthy Climate Plan focused specifically on 2030 targets. This will include some considerations around 2030 actions, but also think about what needs to happen 2030 to 2050. And additionally, the My Healthy Climate Plan, really in that focus on the near term, did kind of like narrow the scope to like priority actions in the near term and didn't necessarily account for every emission source in the economy. The comprehensive climate action plan by definition needs to be comprehensive. So we'll be looking at a broader set of activities, though we will continue to prioritize the actions that are going to have the biggest impact to make sure that we can reach that 2050 target. So it's a little bit of the context. We had our first comprehensive climate action plan engagement session, and fitting with the theme of today, where we're hearing about some of the activities around the justice pillar, the environmental justice pillar and the climate plan. That's the kickoff of the CCAP engagement, was a engagement session on how do we come up with a framework and approach to prioritize environmental justice as we continue this implementation of the climate plan. We'll conclude our engagement sessions with another event on the justice pillar. It'll be the only one that gets 2 events, one at the beginning, one at the end. And then obviously we seek to integrate environmental justice throughout in partnership with Regina and her team and the folks at the Community Worker Economic Transition Office, which you'll hear from later today. And I guess I'll quickly pause just to remind folks that, because this is context for the entire day today. When we released the My Healthy Climate Plan, we went through a process of identifying priorities. One of the #1 priorities was figuring out how we build more capacity as it relates to implementing Justice 40 commitments, and to help make sure that we're deploying and implementing the climate plan in a just and equitable manner. Coming out of that, we made some commitments to make sure that our office went to the Michigan Advisory Council on Environmental Justice meetings on a monthly basis, provided quarterly updates there. We also made a commitment that Regina's team would come here and have an audience with all of you to be able to provide updates more frequently. And so that's part of today as well. And then obviously some of the flagship initiatives that we're undertaking to make sure that we pursue the justice goals completely are going to be talked about later too. So now, so that's kind of, if you think about our work, there's the planning piece, the strategy piece, and then we have a number of initiatives that are really focused on how do we mobilize as many people as possible to hit these ambitious targets. Our Climate Corps program is the flagship of that effort of how do we mobilize as many people as possible, how do we get more people acting on climate across all kind of venues of change. We have our cohort 1 ends their service on November 15th, including Kayla, who's here in the room today, who's in our office, and about 28 other folks that'll be in Grand Rapids later this week to close out their service. I think last I checked, at least a third of them are staying at the organizations they're at full time and in new roles, and then another set are out in the world in new jobs, but still in the climate and clean energy space. Ali, who was in our office, actually left early to go to a job at Walker Miller Energy Services, which proves a nice gateway into the clean energy economy. So very excited about that. We have our second cohort, which is 32 members out in nonprofits, local governments, somebody's placed with the Michigan Intertribal Council. We have the Michigan AFL-CIO has a member. We've got kind of a variety of organizations that are receiving members. They'll be kicking off their cohort experience this week as well, so they're overlapping with the previous cohort. We also had a visit from the American Climate Corps a couple weeks ago in Detroit, which was delightful to see. And I will say I got to see not all, but like 5 of the presentations from our members who got to present to the White House about their experience and the work that they had done. And it blew me away. And I know because we went to dinner later with the folks from the White House, they said that they immediately started texting everybody to say how awesome all the presentations were and that they needed to get copies of them and everything and they've been doing a roadshow across the country. So I think we put our best foot forward there. And hopefully there will be more opportunities for you all to hear from the previous cohort, but also this upcoming one and ways to collaborate. So mobilize as many folks as possible, pursue strategic initiatives to help implement the climate plan around priority areas. One of those areas is citing as much renewable energy as we can to get to that 60% renewables target. We have a CPRG award that's focused on siting on greenfields, brownfields, all over the state of Michigan at a utility scale. We have the Solar for All program that's really looking at rooftops, community scale solutions. And we, as I mentioned, major update there is Dr. Joy Wong is on board as the new director. We've got our planning consultant RFP released. Proposals are due by the 19th. And you'll see we have an expectation that over the next year, we plan to use the planning period to really design the program with a ton of input from all stakeholders, this council, but also the individual members of this council, as well as communities that'll benefit from the program, industries that'll help us make sure we implement the program. And so you can expect a lot more on that coming soon, but we'll have some dedicated input sessions and planning sessions as it relates to the Solar for All program moving forward. And again, we didn't have the number on here, but $156 million program over the course of 5 years. Last of the kind of priority initiatives and big announcements as it relates to figuring out how we mobilize around the climate plan and take some strategic steps toward implementation. Just 2 weeks ago, we launched the Michigan Climate Investment Accelerator. That is $11 million funding to support community lenders in securing federal funds and deploying capital in Michigan, $1 million of technical assistance, $10 million in matching grants. And then accompanying that is the Michigan Climate Investment Hub, which is a public-private partnership with the Kresge Foundation, New Lab in Michigan Central in Detroit, and a number of other nonprofit organizations from across the country that are providing clean energy financing solutions, all to come together to figure out how we get that funding to Michigan. As a reminder, we've talked a lot about the EPA's Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund. That is the Solar for All program is one pillar of that. The Clean Communities Investment Accelerator is another pillar, and the National Clean Investment Fund is the third of those. Collectively, they're $27 billion. This initiative is primarily focused at the Clean Communities Investment Accelerator, which is $6 billion of funding that goes to community development finance institutions and credit unions in the form of grants for them to then provide cost-effective loans for green technologies in low-income communities that have typically not had access to such financing and to such technologies. So what we decided to do in partnership with the Make It in Michigan Competitiveness Fund is put out a matching program to support any credit union or CDFI that applies for and receives that funding from one of the national award recipients under the Clean Communities Investment Accelerator. We're hopeful to see this result in 60 awards for credit unions and CDFIs in Michigan. There are 186 credit unions, about 50 CDFIs. Some of those are overlapping, so not quite, add them together to get the total number. But we're hoping to get to at least 60. And we're hoping and would expect that if we're able to get to that 60 number, that would result in another $200 million of direct investment. And then the follow-on kind of leverage ratios are somewhere between 7 and 10 times that, so in the billions of dollars of investment to Michigan, and 100% of this must go to low-income disadvantaged communities. So we're very excited about that. A lot more to come. We'll have more information on it in the new year. This was really the announcement last week with the EPA, the White House, the Lieutenant Governor. You can see the picture there, and then a bunch of the national award recipients, which are the folks all over the country that are actually dispersing this funding. There are 5 of them. Okay. Now, I'm at least a minute behind, maybe more, so I'm going to go quickly. But I went through a number of the things that are happening with our office that we're focused on. But again, as the first slide said, all of state government is mobilizing around this, and 2 particular initiatives that are particularly exciting in the last stretch here. One is in the built environment and in figuring out how we repair and decarbonize homes and businesses. The home energy rebates program had a soft launch in October. It'll have a full launch in the new year. But that is a $210 million program run through the Materials Management Division here in the Sustainability section and Julie Stavelin's team to get the home energy rebates program and electric appliances out into the world and into the communities that need it the most. Very excited about that. That is core to meeting our commitments in the built environment, and will be something that we'll likely have Julie come speak to you all about as it gets rolling. And we'll appreciate any help in promoting that program as it goes. And then just 2 weeks ago, EPA Clean Ports Program made an announcement, $28 million Clean Ports investment in Michigan, and an investment here at the Office of Great Lakes and Energy in a climate planning grant for Michigan's ports. We're really excited about that opportunity and the leadership from the Office of Great Lakes and Emily Fennell and the team there, just to show exactly how comprehensive this needs to be and is from the state as it relates to implementing the climate plan. Finally, this is more of a congratulatory slide here that tribal nations in Michigan received a disproportionately large share of EPA climate pollution reduction grants. We're really excited about that. Through that award, we've had the opportunity to meet monthly with the tribes that are located in Michigan, and we're very excited to continue that work in partnership. You can see some of these numbers here, but it definitely outperforms the proportion of tribes in the country, kind of relative our population and number of tribes here in Michigan. So yeah, just a big kudos to all the work that went into that and all the folks that worked on it. I'm excited to continue that partnership. And then a few more notable headlines. I'll let you all peruse these in the slides that are circulated later. You can see a lot more happening at all times here at the state of Michigan as it relates to climate and beyond just state government action, but local governments, private sector, et cetera. And with that, I think I'm handing it back to Trisha. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, given our timing, does anybody have like maybe 1 or 2 questions for Corey? And if you're online, council members, we ask that you would raise your hand. Lana.
It would be helpful at some point if we had some stories to accompany this. I mean, if somebody asked me what's the governor, what's the legislature, which Michigan doing, I say, well, there's a 1.5 million grant here and there's a 4.7 million grant there, but I don't have any stories to go with it. Yeah, I mean, if there were a story about an indigenous population nation that is got something going, some of the others, I mean, I don't know, for instance, what the clean port, I'd like to know more about the clean port. And that's not scheduled into this meeting, so I'm not expecting it now. And I really guess I don't want a whole book of stuff, but stories would help. They don't have to be comprehensive. Just, some like of your star, most helpful, most tellable investment that you anticipate.
Can I just say something on that? And some of these are just being implemented, so there's not a
Yeah, I know we're early. Yeah, I
a
mean,
human impact that is shown yet. But one thing I've been saying, and it's consistent with the theme of this meeting, when I've been talking about some of these programs, is just saying we've reached a really important stage in our climate action effort. We passed all this legislation which addressed at a macro level, and the My Healthy Climate Plan has the high level plan of what we're really doing to decarbonize the economy. Most of these programs are reaching directly into communities, disadvantaged communities, communities that haven't been part of those discussions before. I think that's the sort of the through line on all of them is we're not talking about doing high level stuff at the state level. We're talking about doing things that are going to have direct impact in communities that need it the most and allow them to save money and participate in the benefits of clean energy and so forth. That may be obvious, but sometimes that sounds newsworthy to people.
So I'll just say we can take that as a note and make sure that we feature some of that in future meetings as they come up and provide updates to the council. I'll also say I do think that you're going to be really excited to hear all about the Justice 40 Accelerator today, just to prime that as well.
Thank you. I'm very enthusiastic about this work. Very enthusiastic. I just think I think the public needs to understand it. I think we've just had a lesson in some of that of the public not appreciating, for instance, this money all came, most of the money, I think it's federal money. It came through a very successful program that Congress and the president passed. And a lot of times people can show by their votes what they understand and what they don't understand. And I think stories are the key, and that they should be part of the gestalt that is as soon as you have a story to tell, because I know these are decisions being made, not programs completed. But
yeah,
that's my point.
Point well taken.
Thank you very much. Let's move on to our next presenter. For the Office of Environmental Justice Public Advocate, Regina Strong will be giving us an update on their work.
All right, thank you so much. And Lana, I take to heart what you said, because I'm all about the stories, right? The impact on people, so people understand how this money is actually going to impact their lives, because it's hard when we do our climate conversations. We use a lot of words that folks don't always connect to themselves, like they see that as something someone else might. So I'm very much with you on the story piece of it, and I think that's at the heart of environmental justice work. One of the things that I'll tell you a quick story, not just for you, for everyone, but one of the things that my office is working on is a climate resiliency planning pilot. Now, for most people, they're like, what? all of us know what that is. And we're doing it in the Detroit 48217 zip code, River Rouge and Ecorse. And if you know anything about that area, there's a lot of industry there. And one of the things in our first, we have a lot of community partners, and those community partners have pulled together community conversations, small group, large group, and we've really been working. But one of the first things they said to us is, what does all that mean? Like, why are we calling it a community resiliency planning pilot? We don't get that. How does that connect to us? They said, all we're working to do is survive both climate change and ongoing inequities in terms of impact from industry, and thrive. We want to thrive. And so we changed it to the plan to survive and thrive based on those stories, based on the feedback. And so I just wanted to share that because I think that's critical to this work as well, is having people connect to it through things that are really impactful in their lives. So a couple things I wanted to update on since the last time I was here. I was trying to remember when that was. It's been maybe a couple meetings ago on a couple things. Quickly, I'll update a few things that have happened on our advisory council, the Michigan Advisory Council on Environmental Justice, or the MACI-J, as we like to call it, because I'm much more into words and names than acronyms. I get lost in acronym soup, so that's why I call it the MACI-J. But a couple things have happened since the last time we met. We have 4 new members, and those 4 new members are, well, we had a returning member, I'll mention that too, a member who left us and went to the Department of Energy and came back. So that's Professor Tony Reams of the University of Michigan and the director of the Detroit Sustainability Clinic. But our new members are Pam Johnson, who's a council member of the Little River Band of Ottawa Indians, Kayla Akina, who's the historical preservation officer at the Gun Lake Tribe, Simone Charles, who is a professor from the University of Michigan School of Public Health, and Kareem Scales, who is the chair of the Community Collaborative on Climate Change in Grand Rapids. And so we have 2 more spots that we're looking to fill before the end of the year, and waiting for a returning member we have slots for different categories, and one of those is local governments. And so we've had transition in both Grand Rapids and Detroit, where those representatives have come from in the past. And so we're working to get those new folks part of the council, as well as an additional public health spot. One of the things that the MACI-J did when they updated their charter it's been about 1.5 years ago now, was look for additional tribal representation as well as public health representation. So just an FYI on that. And the last thing I'll share on the MACI-J is that I guess it's been 2 months now. We had new elections for a new chair and vice chair. And the inaugural chairs and vice chair were Sylvia Ordono of the Michigan Welfare Rights Organization and a water advocate, and Keith Cooley, who many of you know, who's been around these parts for quite some time. And so if you don't know, Keith is retiring at the end of the year from all of this, from his volunteer stuff, from all of it. I think he's going to sail off to the south of France and do something really cool. So we've asked him to keep an extra room just in case we all decide to come visit. But in the new election, Sylvia remained chair, but Dr. Tony Reams is now vice chair. So just wanted to update you on that so that you have a sense of the folks who are part of this work moving forward. So I'm going to move my slides forward because the other thing I wanted to update you on, and I know many of you are familiar with our environmental justice impact grants, and those grants have been moving forward over the last few months, albeit slower than we would like, but I just wanted to give you a quick reminder of what those were all about. It was $20 million approved by the Michigan legislature and Governor Whitmer for our state's first direct to environmental justice communities grant. Although many of the funding from a lot of state departments have impact in environmental justice communities, they aren't often titled that or focused in that area implicitly, even though some of the criteria might be based on that. So wanted to just talk again about the purpose of the grants, which is to reduce environmental health burdens and impacts in Michigan's environmental justice communities and have a positive impact on the residents, funding both place-based and equity-focused projects. And the 4 categories of the grants are any project to improve community health, pollution monitoring, so regulatory monitoring like sensors and those kind of things to give folks a better sense of what's happening in their communities, indoor air qualities in schools and daycares. And that one really stems from some of the link between, concerns around air quality in certain communities and the impacts on schools, and was accelerated through the work around the COVID racial disparities task force that the governor convened. And then blight and contaminated site cleanup and redevelopment on those sites. So $80 million was requested. We only have $20 million. We had 186 applications received, which is why we're still working through them, but we're very, very close. And you see a breakdown on the slide of just what those categories were. And we've pulled in a lot of folks, both within Eagle and in other departments, to help us as subject matter experts, because there was a wide range of focuses in different communities for the applicants. And here's just a quick update on the timeline. Our goal is to announce these by the end of this month, so stay tuned. I know we've had a lot of questions. You all may have questions, but we're really just trying to work through these. There are a lot of projects we are, quite frankly, not going to be able to fund that we've heard about. So we are also looking to do some things with folks who aren't funded to help them find other resources to continue the projects that they've asked us to fund. And these projects have to be completed by September of 2027. So we're working to get these out and pull together as quickly as possible so folks can begin the work that they're asking us to fund. So that's all I wanted to share at this point. So I don't know if there are questions.
Given the time we're running a little bit behind, we're thinking that we'll save questions for the end. There's a next steps and discussion segment. And so we'll go ahead and let because we have 2 more speakers to talk, we'll go ahead and move there and then take questions towards the end. So with that, I would like to introduce Hudson Villeneuve of Elevate Energy and Latia Leonard of the Justice 40 Accelerator program to talk to us about the Michigan Justice 40 Accelerator.
Yeah, hi, thank you. Hey everyone, Hudson Villeneuve, he, him. I work with Elevate Energy. We're one of the program administrators along with the Michigan Environmental Justice Coalition that Latia is a part of. And we are working with Eagle, the Office of Climate Energy, and the Office of the EJ Public Advocate to bring the state's first ever Justice 40 Accelerator project, which we'll dive into here. Latia, do you want to introduce yourself real quick?
Yes. Hi, everyone. My name is Latia Leonard. I'm with MEJC, supporting this project with Elevate. I support in a variety of different capacities, primarily with program operations and community engagement. So it's nice to see everyone, and looking forward to talking about the program.
Thanks. And Julia, we can go to the next slide. So I'm not going to dive into this one too much, but I just kept this up here. You all know about the My Healthy Climate Plan, but just reminding everyone that this Justice 40 Accelerator came out of the MAC-EJ, came out of input from environmental justice communities to form our accelerator program and to help us meet federal Justice 40 goals as well. This Justice 40 Accelerator is also based on a national program that Elevate has run across the country, but this is the first time that we've taken a state-based approach. Next slide. So what exactly is the Justice 40 Accelerator program? The Justice 40 Accelerator Program is a technical assistance program to help community-based organizations receive guidance, grow their capacity to access federal and state clean energy funding. So through a 12-month, year-long, deeply relational program, Latia and I are working individually with 25 organizations here in Michigan that we selected through a robust community engagement process and application process to help them identify what their organizational capacity needs are, provide technical training, and provide some seed funding so that they can go after these federal grants, which are really, really hard to access. If you've ever applied for a federal grant, there's just numerous requirements. The big one that was out this summer and is due on November 21st, you may have heard of the EPA's Community Change Grant. The NOFO on that, the Notice of Funding Opportunity, was 96 pages in and of itself, just to like read what you had to do to be able to apply for that. So because of how difficult that is, and the state of Michigan recognized that there was a need to provide a resource so that community groups could actually access these funds, because we know the best solutions to the climate crisis come from the communities most impacted. And so we wanted to center those voices in this process so that they could actually get funding. But a lot of these groups have never applied to federal funding before. They don't have the SAMS.gov registrations necessary to apply for federal funding. So our program is here to help them get those necessary registrations, help them go through the grant landscape, identify funding opportunities, and help them apply for grants. Next slide. So who is eligible for this cohort program? 501c3 nonprofits or those with a fiscal sponsor. So we do have quite a few groups who aren't 501c3 nonprofits right this second, but they're sponsored by one. They're community orgs and they're working on becoming 501c3 nonprofits or tribal serving organizations. We do have one tribal serving organization in our cohort. The Intertribal Council in Michigan is participating in our inaugural cohort. And so this was really designed exclusively for community-based organizations, like universities and cities and municipalities were not eligible for this cohort. So this summer we had a very simple application process for nonprofits to join, in which they filled out a online application which required them to describe a project idea that had to do with clean energy, water, climate resiliency, things along that nature, in which they're hoping to get funded. And then we worked with a group of local environmental justice leaders that we paid for their time to then grade these applications and select the final cohort. We ended up getting 98 applications this summer for this program, and we had 25 funding slots available, and there were really, really qualified applicants. And, we're hoping to continue this on a yearly basis, but we're really, really excited about the cohort that we have this year, and that the fact that we use community members to choose who was in the cohort. Eagle, Elevate, and MEJC, the three operators of the program, did not choose who was in the cohort. We wanted to make that external so there wasn't any conflicts of interest or bias in that process, and we designed that intentionally that way. Next slide. So is this for you, Latia? Am I passing this to you?
Yes.
Okay, cool.
Yes. Yeah, so as Hudson just stated, as part of the application process, groups were asked to provide a detailed description of the type of work that they would want to be supported as part of their participation in the Justice 40 Accelerator. For the most part, the only real requirements we had around that was that their project idea fit within one of these several categories that you see listed here, ranging everything from workforce development, energy efficiency, climate planning, transportation, sustainable housing, water quality and water infrastructure, and some others. We throughout the application process, we really tried to steer away from telling groups like what projects they should do, just because we kind of wanted to allow for creative autonomy by groups. But thankfully, we really didn't run into too many situations where this wasn't where this was a problem. Next slide. So just to kind of take you through the journey of the accelerator from a participant standpoint, each of the groups would receive 25,000 in unrestricted funding, and that is just to help provide funding for whatever needs that that organization feels and deems necessary. Another aspect to this cohort includes peer learning engagement and workshop learning. So that includes trainings, and I'll touch a little bit on this next, but trainings provided by us, the program, but as well as giving groups the opportunity to be able to learn from each other throughout this program. Secondly, I would say that providing direct connections between groups and state and federal officials has been another benefit. Many groups that are in our cohort have either had minimum or no direct working experience with Eagle or even with federal officials before. So providing that face-to-face opportunity. And then also Hudson and I providing direct one-on-one support throughout the program, navigator support, helping them navigate a variety of different funding opportunities and helping them with their grant applications. And then finally, kind of getting into the alumni support. All of these organizations will become a part of the alumni community for the accelerator, in which there'll be continued opportunities to connect beyond the 12 months. Next slide, please. So just really quickly about the cohort member experience. As already mentioned, this is a year-long program that provides a variety of different resources for organizations. They receive, in addition to that 25,000 unrestricted funds, they also receive 15,000 in direct technical assistance funds, and that is to support organizations more directly with any TA support that they may need. And so that can go towards anything ranging from grant writing, additional grant writing support, any type of assessments or anything needed of that nature that they may need that is outside of the current capacity of their organization. Hudson and I have been already meeting with organizations one-on-one, and that'll continue throughout the program. And that is just to keep up with the progress of each individual organization, make sure that we're able to work one-on-one with them to handle needs, and also just to keep up with anything that they may need in particular. One of the things that I want to point out about the program, in particular, the social learning aspect of the program, we do have a number of chill and chats and informal convenings for the cohort members, and that is just to continue to build networking and relationship building in addition to the skill building. And then, like Hudson said, most of the participants are coming into this program without a lot of direct federal funding experience. And so they'll get connected to those resources to help them think through federal funding opportunities, but also think through longer term strategic planning for their organizations. Next slide.
Yeah, and to dive in a little bit more about what that 15K in what we call TA dollars can be used for, we actually work with a vendor to contract out these funds. So the CBOs don't directly receive these funds, but based on our one-on-one meetings with the organizations, we determine like what their highest area of need is. Some organizations have a grant writer, so they don't need direct grant writing help, but some don't have a grant writer, and so we'll contract with a professional grant writer to help them apply for certain applications. A lot of groups are working on resilient hub type work for, creating green buildings and green housing, and they might need energy audits done. So we'll work with the vendor to contract that out. Essentially, the TA is designed to help them get very technical help that they may not have had budgeted for, to help them secure funding for their larger project. And you can see some examples of that here. But yeah, next slide. And then I'm going to pass it back to Latia to go over some of the training. So in addition to working one-on-one, we have 1 to 2 trainings each month on different topics, bringing in different experts.
Yeah, so for this program in particular, we have worked really closely and collaboratively with Eagle to formulate a year-long curriculum that would be both beneficial to the cohorts, but also provide individuals within the organizations with the skills that they need to help their organizations thrive long term. This is just a range of those topics, covering anything from grant writing to partnerships, post-award management, philanthropy resources, peer learning. Um, I think the most important thing to know about the curriculum is that it is a living process. While we do have a variety of trainings kind of set, we are going to be building in opportunities for feedback so that the cohort can have a chance to weigh in on what particular topics that might be missing here that might be of importance to them, and that'll be kind of built in throughout the process. We have already had one training with EPN, which went over the community change grant as well as the Thriving Communities grant, and we have a session that's going to be hosted by Eagle to discuss state funding opportunities through them directly. Next slide. So just to give you kind of a high level of the flow of the program, taking a step back here, there are 4 phases to this program. The first phase we have already successfully completed. Much of the phase 1 program, phase 1, the Sunrise, really consisted of statewide engagement and communication around the program, in which we went through that application process that Hudson talked about. And then that kind of accumulated to our kickoff, which was really successful. It was attended by all of the members of the cohort, in which we welcomed them into the space and kind of did expectation setting. Right now we're in phase 2, where we're kind of going through our one-on-one assessment capacity assessments with organizations to better understand their long-term goals and immediate needs. That will be followed by phase 3, which will consist of much more of the curriculum sessions, as well as getting them directly plugged into their TA and helping to flesh out their work plans and project plans. Phase 4, we would anticipate by that point that many groups will be ready to apply for funding opportunities. And honestly, we have had a number of groups have already been applying for opportunities and have applied for opportunities already. And so depending on individual needs, we'll match the program to support, whether it's already with post-award management or with grant writing, depending on where each group is. And then we'll wrap up the program at the end of the 12 months with a celebration and introducing them into the alumni community. Phases 2 through 5 pretty much in a way blends together. We're kind of working with groups based on where they already are. And so some groups are ahead of others, more ahead than others. And that's okay, because we've kind of built the design of the program to be really flexible to the needs of the cohort. Next slide, please.
Yeah, and these numbers you see here are from our national program, which did include some Michigan community-based organizations, but was not a project of Eagle. But I wanted to include this slide to kind of demonstrate what we're hoping to see here in Michigan and some of the success that the national program had. And actually, so these numbers here aren't fully updated with the last national cohort, which just wrapped up. This represents 3 years of work, 2021, 2022, and 2023. And in those 3 years, the Justice 40 Accelerator helped secure over $42 million in funding for community-based organizations, working with over 151 different groups and had an 81% award success rate, which we were really, really proud of. And we're taking that formula and bringing it to the state of Michigan and hoping to duplicate that success here. Next slide, please. And here is our inaugural cohort. So I'll give everyone a second to kind of look at some of the groups. While you're looking at that, I'll dive a little bit more into on how we selected these people. We had a rubric that our EJ leaders used to grade the applications. But we weren't just selecting community-based organizations with the most capacity or with the least capacity per se. We wanted a diverse cohort that had a range of organizational capacities. So some of our groups on this list have no paid staff, are hardly registered, aren't registered as a nonprofit quite yet, and are true community neighborhood-based groups that have just formed. And then some of our groups are well-established nonprofits. Maybe they're just starting to get into EJ work though and need help with the federal grant landscape. And the reason we designed it that way was so that some of our larger organizations could partner with some of our smaller organizations on grants and help land different funding sources. And we also required a nominal amount of geographic diversity to try to spread the groups out around the state. But we did use Eagle's My EJ Screen tool, and we trained our reviewers on that tool so that they could read the applications and look to see if these projects were addressing vulnerable and underserved communities, Justice 40 communities as we define them. So we had a great group of 8 environmental justice leaders that we paid to review these applications. And then we had a session. It was a 4-hour session on Zoom, and all the reviewers spent all of the time trying to decide which 25 would get in out of the 98 that applied. And it was a really, really great, healthy discussion. And I'm just really proud of that process that we had, in that like the administrators of the program weren't the ones who chose the groups, and these are the groups they chose. There are a lot of great project ideas here happening. Some of these groups have already applied for community change grants. Some of them applied for Eagle's EJ Impact Grant. And if they receive those awards, we'll be working with them to help them manage the grant. Some need to apply to grants, so we'll be working with them over the course of this year to make that happen. But yeah, I just want to thank Eagle, the Office of Climate and Energy, the Office of EJ Public Advocate for having me and Latia here. And we're happy to take any questions, or if we're waiting until a different time to take questions, you can also feel free to shoot us an email, which is right there on that slide.
Thank you very much. We'll take questions at the end. So let's move to our next presenter, Jonathan Smith, who's going to talk to us about updates for the Community and Worker Economic Transition Office.
Oh, sure.
The slides then.
Okay.
Should people just use the arrows?
Get it. Great. Well, thanks everybody for having me here. Can everybody online hear okay? I'm gonna assume yes, I guess. Speak up if you can. I don't know. For those of you who haven't met before, my name is Jonathan Smith. I'm the Chief Deputy Director at the Michigan Department of Labor and Economic Opportunity. For the last year, have been working to launch the Community and Worker Economic Transition Office, which, as all of you know, was created as part of the Clean Energy and Jobs Act last year. We'll point out my colleague Kate Bell is also here today, representing Director Corbin. She's our policy director and has been very engaged in this work as well. So before I kind of go through the presentation, I want to say why I think the work that we're doing in Michigan on economic transition is really unique, and also why I think it's important. It's unique in that there are other states that have created what are often called just transition offices. However, the work of those other offices is generally focused on coal communities, in particular coal mining communities. And the scope of that work is by and large around mitigating the harm that is happening or has happened to those communities as coal mining has disappeared. The office in Michigan is different in that it is focused on our coal-fired plants that are scheduled to be decommissioned. But it is also focused on our auto communities and the auto industry and how it is going to be impacted by clean energy transitions, particularly the ICE to EV transition. And it's also very different in scope in that because that transition in the auto sector is going to take place over a period of years and really decades, we have this opportunity to, rather than just focus on mitigating harm, rather than just showing up after a plant has been announced that it's closing or has closed, we can engage early and proactively to help our communities and our workers and our employers actually try to navigate to where we think the opportunities are going to be. Why I think this is incredibly important is obviously, folks in this room and online, you all understand, the ways in which economic shifts in Michigan over the last 30 years have done a lot of damage to some of our traditional auto communities. We have, several communities in the state of Michigan that were in the top 10 for per capita income and prosperity in 1980, and today have poverty rates over 30%. So, we have this opportunity to try to help those communities benefit from some of the positive economic change that's going to come about as a result of clean energy transitions. But, maybe like more tactically, if what folks around this table care about is making sure that we meet our climate goals, we have to strengthen and expand the coalitions of folks who support those climate goals. I think what we saw last week is further evidence that if you present people with the perception that what's in the best interest of the climate is in opposition to or in conflict with their economic self-interest, folks will choose policymakers who prioritize their economic self-interest over and over again. And the opportunity we have through this office is to demonstrate in real and tangible ways that we can connect those two things, that we can help Michigan businesses and Michigan workers see that a growing energy sector can be a source of jobs and employment and good jobs and economic opportunity for their community, such that they will want to continue to prioritize our state's work towards climate resiliency. So this office has a mission of ensuring that our communities, our workers, and our employers that are going to be impacted by energy transitions have the support they need to proactively prepare for and benefit from Michigan's future economy. We want to do work across 4 kind of key strategic areas. One is developing a statewide transition strategy. This is one of the required components of the legislation. 2 is data sharing and analytics. 3 is deep community engagement, and 4 is resource navigation. What we know will matter in terms of success here is our ability to coordinate across Michigan departments, including folks at Eagle, who we work very closely with, And this one hopefully will remain to be true, but leveraging federal resources to supplement what where the state has investments. Here's a little bit of a roadmap of where we have been. So after the law was signed last year, we got to work interviewing some key stakeholders. We spent the late part of 2023 engaging with folks around what a framework for the office should be. Towards the beginning of the year, this year, we finalized that vision, mission, and structure. And starting really in February, did a series of community engagement roundtables around the state, designed to get feedback on our initial vision for the office and work towards making sure that it was rooted in what communities, workers, and employers around the state viewed as the kind of most important challenges. This year, in advance of having state budget and the authority to hire permanent staff, we have been engaged in a number of projects, research projects, the community roundtables I just discussed, a handful of other projects I'll share more about in a minute. The good news here is that this summer we got our first tranche of state funding, and just this month, with the new budget year coming into place, we have the ability to hire staff, and we're able to accelerate some of our program implementation. So the four capabilities, big picture of capabilities, we are focused on creating a data-driven central source of truth. We continue to hear from lots of folks who don't necessarily know what these transitions are going to look like, what they're going to mean for them, how is their community going to be impacted, what are the opportunities, what are the risks, how should they prepare for it. So developing some of these materials and being a resource for folks with questions is a key piece of this. Employer engagement, being able to drive employers to the right programming to support them, identifying and facilitating diversification opportunities, which we'll come back to in a second. On the community engagement side, we're not trying to tell communities how they should prepare. We really want to provide the information and data that they need and the capacity enhancement so that they can create a vision for their community that is vibrant, that is more diversified, that's healthier, and again, want to help increase the capacity of communities around the state to actually develop that plan and implement it. And for workers, want to make sure that we are proactively reaching out when we see an event happen, making sure that folks are able to navigate to the right resources. A big part of this office for some of the stakeholders who advocated for it to be created was also thinking about what are the gaps in our workforce system, what are some new programs that might be needed to fill those gaps. We won't necessarily have the funding to deploy new programming in the short term, but we can kind of make the case to the legislature, our partners, legislature, and others around what sort of programs Michigan might want to enact if we want to be a leader on worker transition. Some updates here on the data and analytics side. So one of our early projects has been developing a data tool that the state and our regional economic development partners can use to proactively support auto suppliers with diversification and retooling opportunities. We were able to complete phase one with support from Kresge Foundation. We are looking to partner with a federal agency on phase two, and we'll be kicking that phase two off tomorrow, regardless of whether the federal funding comes in. But that will be to really operationalize this tool. And so the idea here will be we will be able to look at all of the thousands of small independent manufacturers around the state, understand what their capabilities are, and understand what their risk profile is, so that as we develop diversification opportunities, we can look backwards at the capabilities of these manufacturers and match them up with the right opportunity for diversification. We will be kicking off the statewide transition plan is due by the end of the month, and so doing early thinking and work on what can go into that plan to use our advisory council to help fill in some of the gaps there. Next steps in this phase of the work is going to be additional research on economic impacts of clean energy transitions for the auto and utility sector. Really want to make sure we understand, as I mentioned, some of the gaps in worker supports, as well as like the financing gap that would be needed to be addressed to get there. But we have some additional kind of market research around what the future might look like, particularly in the clean energy space. Looking at the future where the most opportunity is, and making sure that we are aligning that with the state's strengths, whether that's our research universities, strongest research capabilities, where our workforce is the strongest, where our existing employers are investing the most of their private R&D dollars. So really trying to understand the smart bets to make for companies that want to position themselves for the future. We have some research we want to be able to undertake to develop an objective measurement of what transition impact means in terms of prioritizing resource deployment. So looking at things like, and working with Larry and his team and others, but thinking about, look at, for example, municipal tax revenue where it is particularly single employer or single sector dependent. So thinking through, kind of objective metrics like that we can use to start putting more definition behind which communities we think are going to experience the most potential impact. On the industry side, so we've been doing a lot of work to draw down federal resources, as I mentioned. We successfully convinced the Department of Energy to set aside $50 million in a federal grant program and use it for a grant program that states could apply directly for to sub-grant out dollars to small, medium-sized auto manufacturers. We received $22.6 million of the $50 million and are looking to make sure we've locked that down as quickly as possible here this calendar year. We also worked with MEDC to secure $9.1 million from U.S. Treasury for a grant that's going to go towards helping these smaller suppliers tap into other sources of capital. In particular, there is a federally funded state administered program called the State Small Business Credit Initiative. And so a lot of the $9.1 million in technical assistance will go to helping small manufacturers, particularly in underserved communities, access these capital access tools that are deployed through a commercial bank. So helping them get bank ready. We want to have a customer focus. I know, like from my work prior to coming back to the state during the Great Recession, kind of auto restructuring era, we did a lot of work in clean energy, and a lot of it was not divorced, it's the wrong word. It was not closely connected enough to a market approach and a strong consumer signal. And we saw a lot of companies, including companies here in Michigan, that were really groundbreaking, amazing companies, get support from the federal government, support from the state government. The consumer market never developed at the speed with which we hoped, and those companies were unsuccessful. We want to make sure that we are, as much as possible, directing folks to areas where we know there is going to be strong customer demand. So our first project in this space is around energy sector diversification. We're partnering with the state's largest investor-owned utilities. They are going to be spending, as you all know, billions of dollars building out clean energy, renewable energy infrastructure, resilient infrastructure over the next decade. Our state's utilities have existing internal goals around local procurement that are really strong. And we want to help lift up those goals and share them publicly so that they get credit for all the great work they're doing to buy from local Michigan sources. But we also want to partner with them on supportive programming that will allow the state to help manufacturers who are not currently in the utility supply chain move into this space. So if you have an auto supplier, that is making things like brackets and metal framing and poles, in the auto sector, can they move into the utility sector? But also, can we, in more advanced manufacturing, whether it's transformers, solar, look for these opportunities for auto suppliers that may need or want a diversification opportunity to support our utilities as they build out this new grid. That is, I think, the first of what hopefully will be a number of customer strategies. Have begun conversations around a DoD or defense prime contractor strategy, infrastructure equipment, including water infrastructure. So hopefully we will be able to replicate this successful program that we're going to partner with utilities on in other spaces as well. Developing a supplier playbook, again, in some partnership with the federal government here with Argonne National Lab. resource materials for manufacturers able to do ICE-to-EV transition. And we'll say probably lots more to come in terms of ways that we can build resources for employers. Next steps I kind of covered, looking at the other sectors beyond energy. On the community side, I mentioned we held 13 community roundtables this year, 8 at the very beginning of the year, after which we issued a report called Supporting Michiganders Navigating Transitions in the Auto and Energy Sector. We summarized the key findings. We have not updated it after the initial 8, but I think the findings have largely been true. I won't go through all 8, but we'll say the common themes are, number one, an appreciation for the proactive approach of trying to search support to communities, to workers, and to employers before there is a crisis so that they can plan for the future. I would say a second key theme that comes up a lot is that a lot of the folks that we want to help the most have the least capacity to independently go figure out how to navigate towards this stuff. So we got to make it easier. And so those are some of the things we are working to build into our programming, but also sharing these insights with other partners so that they can leverage these insights and build them into their programming. But then also making sure that we're focusing on navigation. So, not every state program needs to have a super robust outreach strategy. If we have really strong technical assistance and navigation programming that can make sure that the right folks are finding the right programs. We're having our first advisory committee meeting next week. We have about 75 folks from communities around the state, representing local government and community nonprofits, workers, employers. Excited to kick that meeting off. And a really exciting program I think we're particularly keen to get moving here in the new year is our community playbook. We issued an RFI this summer soliciting feedback on this project. Essentially we want to develop a resource for communities that has 3 parts. One, as the state prepares for natural disasters, we have simulated exercises. We take all the state officials responsible for emergency response, we put them in a conference room, we say, okay, a tornado just hit, or a dam broke, or a nuclear plant has melted down. Like, what are we going to do? And we allow the folks in charge of response to prepare for that response in a simulated way. We want to have a similar simulated exercise or 2 in a handful of communities where we say, okay, a large employer just picked up the phone and called and said they're closing in 6 months. What does the state and local coordinated response look like? Let's document that response. Let's look for ways to improve it and enhance it if we can. But use that as a way so that if you are a city manager or county economic development official, you now have at least a roadmap of what you're going to have to navigate with some sort of help in terms of sequencing and front loading the right decisions and making sure that you're handling that as well as possible. But we don't just want to do that. We want to also build into this playbook resources so that we can help communities navigate towards programs and funds that will help them as they develop growth and diversification plans. We know that ultimately, the challenge of many of our communities is this challenge of economic diversification. They are too dependent on a single sector or a single employer. They're very, very exposed to risk. So helping them become more resilient oftentimes means diversification and growth and focusing on quality of life community enhancements. So how can we surge some resources to a handful of communities through this playbook, but then also, perhaps pick a handful of communities that we think are particularly exposed to risk and particularly capacity constrained, and actually lead a cohort in a playbook deployment and planning exercise. So got some great responses to our RFI earlier this year, having some productive conversations with philanthropy about what that program could look like in the new year, and hope to have more to share there soon. On the employee engagement side, we kicked off something called the EV Workforce Hub. This was announced by President Biden in April. This is focused on helping make sure that Michigan workers are prepared for good paying and union jobs in the future, particularly in the EV and mobility space. We have identified 4 key areas with stakeholder input, largely defined by feedback from these stakeholders, the 4 key challenges that we think need to be overcome, and have a number of pilots and projects in each of those 4 areas that we have started working on. That work started with help and support and incubation from the White House, has been transferred over to state administration, and we secured a fellow from the Department of Energy, a RAMP fellowship program, and she is going to be leading this work, or co-leading this work along with the state over the next 2 years. So we're excited about that. We also got a grant from the Family Worker Fund that we're going to be using to partner with the Burning Glass Institute to develop a framework and tools that will help us define and measure in very objective ways job quality standards. We have job quality standards. I'm sure many of you are familiar with. The Biden and Harris administration put out the joint job quality standards that were published by Department of Labor, Department of Commerce, focused on a lot of principles around things like good pay and good benefits, and respect and dignity in the workforce, and skills-based advancement and commitments to diversity. And it is very difficult to measure an employer's actual commitment to some of these principles. That's why we're partnering with BGI. They have a really interesting data tool that they've developed that can help states actually measure an employer commitment to some of these things. So we can lift up employers who are doing really well in this space, share those best practices, hopefully even use this as a framework that will allow us to think about deployment of state funding in a way that accommodates or that rewards employers who've made a strong commitment to job quality. So excited to get that work going. And then I mentioned previously, we need to do some additional research on workforce strategies and some financing and implementation gaps that might exist there. So that is what we have been up to this year. Excited to be accelerating this work in the year ahead, and have been really appreciative and thankful for all the partnership from Eagle in particular over the last year. We have, I don't know how many times, Corey, I talk to you each week, but it's really, really great. I think, so much of the work that needs to get done, touches on issues that no single department has all of the programming or all of the expertise. And so in this space in particular, the collaboration across the entire administration has been fantastic and really rewarding. So appreciate that and look forward to continuing that in the new year as well.
Well done. Smart stuff.
Thanks. So yeah, happy to answer questions, or if we're doing this later, that's fine too, whatever. I think we're at later.
We are at later. We are back on track, and actually we are ahead of time. So plenty of time for discussion. If you are online, just a reminder, we ask that commissioners raise their hand to be called upon. Yeah, we'll open it up for questions for any of the speakers. Heck?
Excuse me. Yes. Thank you. That was great presentation. Given the election that we just lived through, the elephant in the room, one thing that I noticed is that we have a new administration coming in with a leader who is not talking about electrified mobility in very encouraging ways. Now, you could argue that Elon Musk will have influence and that might change. But what worries me is that we're not doing a good job of explaining to the people of Michigan and broader that electrified mobility is the future of not just in Michigan and the US, but the global market. In other words, we have a globe that is decarbonizing. And if we want our auto industry and other newer industries in other areas to thrive, we have to be focused on electric mobility more than internal combustion mobility. Have you given much thought to how we could communicate that better and build a stronger case? Because it clearly voters were, you saw union voters going for Donald Trump who were thinking we just got to get rid of these EVs and everything will be good. But we'll be right back where we were when Japan kind of cleaned our clocks a couple decades ago. if we take our foot off of the electric car accelerator.
Yeah, good to see you back. Thanks for that question. There's a couple things I've been thinking about in this space over the last week. One is, you're absolutely right. This is a global market that is shifting and changing. In the past, I've seen quotes from folks from the Detroit 3 executives saying, we are competing against global automakers. And for us to be competitive against global automakers, we need to be able to make products that are competitive in every market. The GM pulled out of Europe, pulled out of most of Asia, went from making $2 billion a year in China to losing $200 million a quarter in China. Ford also pulled out of many of their overseas markets. Their business plan for becoming more competitive, both in North America and overseas, involves being really good at making EVs. And that's why they have made these massive investments in shifting more of their production to electric vehicles. They will need to make that case, though, because you're absolutely right that it is oftentimes viewed by many folks as these are EV mandates, these are policy decisions, these are products that are being pushed on folks for environmental reasons or for climate reasons. When we know that it is our industry that is leading the charge on this and leading these investments because they have to do this to be competitive as we move forward. So I think I'll be looking to see what industry says about EV policy in the weeks ahead. You're right. Elon Musk playing a role in the Trump administration is interesting, both because he's obviously very famous for running the world's largest electric vehicle company, but that could cut both ways, right? I mean, he might not want money going to GM and Ford and others to take market share from him, right? And so it will be interesting to see where they land on this. I think we're just going to need strong leadership from industry to make the case for why this is important to them. And I have had some conversations with folks in DC who work in the auto sector who are already thinking about this, and we'll see where they land. But the other thing I'll say is, if you look at some of the things in particular, like the JD Vance kind of wing of the Trump-aligned Republican Party, if you look at what their priorities are, you will see a lot of focus on manufacturing. You will see a lot of focus on the national security and economic security rationale for having a strong industrial policy. And I think if we're leading with environment and batteries, that might be a challenge. But I think if we are aligning our interests with the folks who care a lot about whether or not we can make critical national security defense equipment, and whether we can make things like semiconductors, this is not batteries and energy security is a national security and economic security issue. And I do think that there is a space for bipartisanship with some people who have some weird views that we'll have to work through how we navigate some of that. We won't agree with not everyone who is on both sides of that continuum will agree with each other on everything. But I do think there has been a convergence over the last year that I've seen, including at this reindustrialized conference in Detroit this past summer, where you saw a lot of folks really focused on from both the left and the right, focused on the importance of manufacturing, the importance of industrial supply chains, and the need for America to continue to be a place that is a manufacturing leader and that can build and equip itself with the critical components it's going to need in the 21st century. So we'll have to just focus where we can on building those kind of partnerships.
Let's turn to Tanya Pezlowski's question in the chat. So this is a question for Jonathan Smith, I believe. And she's asking, can you say more about the tool that measures employer commitment?
Yeah, we are just kicking off this work. There's an organization called the Burning Glass Institute. They have developed a proprietary tool using some public and some private data sources that looks at that has identifies ways that you can measure things like commitment to that ways that you can measure things that are characteristic of job quality. So things that are easy to measure, right, is average pay or the value of benefits packages. Things that are more difficult to measure, but they have found a way to measure include things like employer commitment to skills-based advancement. They can look at things like how many of their employees at what pay levels have college degrees versus how many pathways do they allow for non-college graduates to enter into more senior roles. So some of this will involve some secret sauce that they've developed. And as a non-mathematician statistician, I won't try to explain all of them. But the idea here is that they have a model for this that's worked, that's data backed, that's rigorous, that we can bring our state's Bureau for Labor Market Information, the folks who work for the state who are labor market economists, to help us develop our own principles and then work with them to develop use their data to find ways to measure it. So I'm very excited about that because it has been a place where I think we have done a pretty good job trying to emphasize job quality, mirroring some of the things we've seen come out of DC over the last few years. We've had some real wins in this space, including in the clean energy space, like where, for example, through the state's competitiveness fund, we created a job quality checklist and asked applicants to make certain forward-looking commitments and then secured those commitments in the process of making awards. So that's been very exciting, but I think this will be an opportunity for us to really accelerate that work by having, again, a sort of data-backed and transparent way to really try to measure these things and hold up those best-in-class employers and examples.
Thank you very much. Lana Pollock, I think you're next. You're muted.
You're muted, Lana. No.
High tech, I get it, I did it.
There you go.
Okay. There's really, really good stuff here. It's always a pleasure to hear it. I think it's thoughtful. I think you really are seemingly threading. There's going to talk about threading two different needles. One is the needle of doing this right, so it's inclusive. So the EJ and other issues related to left behinds are being addressed as we go forward with climate and the economic plans. I see a lot of thoughtfulness here. Thank you. The one I'm going to raise, and I don't know at where the table is that considers this besides the legislature, which doesn't necessarily consider it, and that's the challenge of threading the needle so that you actually achieve your climate goals. Now, Michigan, by that I just quickly, Michigan passed really good, tough, hard-fought legislation a few months ago, the Energy and Jobs Act or whatever. I think that's the name. And some of these investments that don't deal with manufacturing so much, but specifically data centers, but also chip making or battery making, they're huge energy consumers. Now, if we go forward, obviously, willy-nilly and don't give any thought to the source of those energies, we will blow apart and bring down and not meet Michigan's vaunted energy goals for 2030, 35, 50. I think those are the marking years. So I'm asking, is the governor's climate advisory climate council a place where that might be considered? Is there another source that is considered where the potential conflicts are? And they're just hard, but if they're addressed, we'll do better than if we don't address them, the conflicts.
I think it's fair to bring this up in this forum. I think this discussion's taking place in a lot of different parts of state government and beyond. There's various pieces of legislation that have been proposed, and there's been a lot of weighing in on, there's been the idea that data centers may be a reality if we can find a way to, in an environmentally friendly way, allow some of them to locate in Michigan. That's probably a good thing. But to make sure that some important protections are included in there, and I think there have been real efforts to do that, and there have been a lot of stakeholders outside of state government who've encouraged that as well. But that's I think you're right in just saying, like, now is a good time to have a broader discussion about this and to share views on it. What those protections might be, what's really critical, and because it's moving quickly.
Yeah, and thank you, Director Roos, because you're so good at this. And you've done it before with with the clients that are
What
not
is the question?
but there's an EJ element in that legislation too that's not being addressed. There really aren't so far adequate or any protections for cost of protecting people so that they can afford the energy, so they can afford the water. So there's EJ issues, there's energy goal issues, and I'm looking for a table of thoughtful people to just be honest about what the ups and the downs are in all of this.
Yeah.
And I don't think in the legislature, it's really hard in the legislature. I think the legislature could use Michigan could use some other fora besides the legislature.
Yeah.
And I will leave it at
I think that's a thoughtful comment.
Thank you.
Now, I'll offer something there to just, I think today I wanted to highlight this anyway. So I think today you got to hear from Regina in the Office of Environmental Justice Public Advocate. You got to hear from the Community and Work for Economic Transition Office, Office of Climate and Energy. The administration is sort of structured in a way that, like, each department that has a leadership role then has specific policy offices that help drive forward on a specific agenda.
Mhm.
And then we all, for the most part, have some type of advisory council or participation council. And I think those are the venues where a lot of these conversations need to happen. And then we need to make sure that the climate perspective is brought to Jonathan's work, is brought to Regina's work, but also be deferential to, like, the environmental justice conversations happening. We bring the climate work there, make sure Regina's here, make sure Jonathan's here. I think that there's actually, like, it's going to be hard to find one forum because there's so many different ways to prioritize different policy aspects, but I think it's being present in all of those with kind of holding these shared priorities equal across them that is going to be particularly valuable. So I do think we've tried to figure out how we can have some of these cross conversations. I mean, today is an evidence of that, but also when we try to convene folks around the climate conference to have the MACEJ and the Climate Council meet together, maybe we could add the Community and Worker Transition team to that, or maybe the Council on Future Mobility and Electrification. But when you start putting it all together, like, all of those entities need to be involved, and there are a lot of thoughtful people across them. So I just wanted to say, I think it's a tough challenge, but we're trying to think about how to do that. And if we can do that via this venue, in some cases, we'd be happy to have additional folks come and provide presentations and conversation.
Thank you. And I think that's very helpful. I think what might be missing is if anything can be short and simple or direct, is the part of the questions that need to be asked and answered by the tables that you've just mentioned is, how does this economic program, or that's considering other things impact the energy goals, energy commitments that Michigan has made in the law. And that the question has to be asked before anybody's going to answer it. And as you've just said, and I say you because the way this is set up on my screen, I can't tell who's talking. I don't know, Tricia, or if you could just enter.
That was Corey.
Okay, thanks, Corey. Yeah, thank you very much.
We can twirl the laptop if that's helpful.
What?
Never mind.
All right.
We're all in the same room, so it's good.
Right. I know, that's the thing. And you're really little on the screen. But the point is, yes, I think EJ has come to the fore because that's good. You all look so good. EJ has come to the fore because over a period of years, people have made it come to the fore. It didn't just arise on its own, even though it was always there and always needed to be raised. So, and I'm saying this needs to be raised. How does economic development, how does that merge with, or how do we blend that in a positive way with our energy goals too? Because they're done separately, but they don't live in separate universes. So.
Mm-hmm.
Our next question is from Phyllis Meadows.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Really have enjoyed the presentations today. Very exciting to see the plan getting life breathed into it. And so thank you all for sharing. I was most, the thought that's been sort of lingering on my mind, I think, Jonathan, you probably triggered it for me, and that is this work, and especially with companies who are going to be transitioning, this has a lot of implications, not only for the company themselves, but the people that they employ. And the one thing that came to mind for me is is the whole notion of displacement, and to what degree, as we begin to move into this new economy, we're going to displace workers, or is it on our mind at all about assuring that people land, whether they need to be retrained or relocated or whatever, that they land, that this doesn't impact the common man in such an adverse way that, that we haven't given any forethought to. And that's particularly the economic implications of these changes that are going to be occurring. And so I was also thinking about the measurement, and that maybe perhaps that is something the council should look at, because I heard, and I know you couldn't probably tell me all the details and all the metrics, but I would hope that we would go beyond knowing what the baseline is to really being able to collect data that not only tells us about the organization and not only describes the people today, but keeps an eye on what differences this is going to make in the lives of people and their experience in the climate scenario, their opportunities, because I see this new economy as opportunity as well, and that somehow we keep our eyes on the adverse effects as well as the sort of the positive effects, and make sure that we're being mindful of both as we move forward.
Yeah, thank you for that question and the comment. I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, let me tell you what I don't want to do. Having lived through the Great Recession and the auto restructuring and the very painful way in which that played out in the state of Michigan, we had tens of thousands of people losing their job like every day. I mean, there were just these mass layoffs. We had small manufacturers, going out of business, putting the machining equipment on a truck. It was getting shipped down to Mexico, and those jobs are gone forever, right? Like we had such a huge structural shift in the state's economy in such a short amount of time. And in a way, we still have barely recovered from the 2000 recession. I mean, people forget this, but like, you know, and so we just had this double whammy that was incredibly painful. And we ended up having to do a lot of things that didn't work, you know, like going and finding folks who had been working in a manufacturing job for 20 years or 30 years and saying, all right, we're going to train you to be a nurse now, or we're going to like, you're going to learn how to be a computer coder. You know, like those are just really difficult. Asking someone, you know, maybe earlier in their career, you know, you can find, and maybe for some folks that kind of career shift is something they really want to do. But by and large, you know, it's going to be a challenge. If your response is trying to retrain people for just completely different jobs, that's tough. Now, we don't know what the economy is going to look like moving forward. Lots of things could change. But, you know, if as the best guess, when we've talked to economists and we've asked, you know, folks who are experts in the auto sector, is that we're going to continue to see this gradual transition. And if you think about ICE EV in Michigan, it's actually been like very positive, right? We have all these really amazing job statistics, but all the new great jobs we're creating. We still have a very low unemployment rate, and the reason for that is because, you know, we're essentially overproducing, right? The companies don't know exactly how fast the transition is going to happen, so they're continuing to produce the ICE vehicles that are very profitable that we make here in Michigan, and they're beginning this production. They're beginning to ramp up this production on the EV side, and so we're seeing this sort of double investment right now, and it's having a pretty good impact on the state's economy. The double investment will go away at some point, but it is going to be a gradual shift as ICE production goes down and EV production goes up, in a way that is hopefully going to be easier to manage from a workforce perspective, because, you know, more of the impacted workers are going to, you know, we have an aging workforce, right? So over the next decade, as some of these, you know, ICE EV transitions play out, we'll see retirements. We'll see folks, you know, kind of naturally leaving these roles. And so the job of matching people up with some of the new opportunities is a little easier. But this is also why, you know, we've had an early push on the employer side, because the best way to help a worker is to make sure they don't lose their job in the first place. And so building a lot of supportive programming so we can go in and we can find the manufacturers in the state of Michigan who we know are in sunsetting technologies. We know that, you know, they may have a few years or maybe even a few decades. I mean, if you're making aftermarket parts for something like the F-150, you are probably making those parts for 20 more years, right? So we know not just because you're making ICE components doesn't mean that you need to, you know, get out of that business right away. But we can find the folks who are have some amount of risk exposure, and if we can help those employers identify these new opportunities, whether it's in energy, defense and aerospace, infrastructure equipment, and shift more and more of our manufacturing base to some of these diversified advanced manufacturing sectors. That's going to make sure that we don't have as hard a job to do on the back end of retraining and placing displaced workers, right? So there's going to be a few different strategies and tactics that we have to sort of play around with here to try to match this stuff up. You know, I have no doubt that we will continue to have some displaced workers in the years ahead. We've had plenty for the last 30 years. So even without things like ICE to EV, we would see displaced workers in the future because of automation, and globalization, and supply chains moving down south, all these other things. You know, we want to make sure that we are that our workforce system is you know, informed by what we know about where the market is going. So we spent a lot of time working with the Bureau of Labor Market Information, with the Upjohn Institute, with other sort of experts. You know, the U of M EV Battery Center. There's a lot of smart folks in the state who are thinking about what 10 years from now or 20 years from now will look like. And so we can start entering, you know, we can start building into folks who are getting training today, skills that we know that will be relevant and needed in the future. So we can sort of future-proof some of these folks as things shift from ICE to EV. The folks who are doing EV work today will have already gone through short-term training programs that have some of that core EV battery related skill set that they will need to be to thrive in those roles in the future. So it's not to say we have it all figured out. It's not to say we have all of the answers, but we do think we have, you know, a better opportunity to try to avoid some of the real challenges we've seen in the past around displaced workers by, again, kind of focusing in on employers that we know are going to be at risk, and really making sure that we are working closely with industry so that we're building our workforce training system with an eye towards what the future is going to look like.
Well, it sounds like you got your eyes on the ball, and you're bringing some lessons learned forward, and clearly, hopefully, in the scheme of that, you're thinking about ways to mitigate any of the effects that it's going to have on the common man who might not just be naturally part of the attrition, or that will be able to thrive. I think somebody has a new initiative that has survive and thrive, but thrive in this economy too. We should look for winners.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, and it also goes to, Lana's point about being really smart about our economic development strategies, focusing in on some of these new technologies that, while they may be energy intensive, we also know are going to have high wages. They're going to be great replacement jobs for folks who are already in the manufacturing sector. And so, I think that is part of what makes this era of economic change different. You think about the shift away from manufacturing and towards the knowledge economy, the benefit of that really accrued to places like Silicon Valley and Seattle and other places, right? But, advanced manufacturing is a place where we know Michigan has a lot of advantage. And so growing our economy in those sectors is a great way to make sure that workers who do end up displaced, that it's, again, not to say they won't need some upskilling and reskilling, but much easier to get them into an advanced manufacturing role than it would be to try to train them for some entirely different sector. So reason is to be hopeful.
Let's turn it over to Director Roos to give us our next steps and to close us out.
Yeah, thanks, Tricia. Really big thanks to our speakers. You stimulated a really thoughtful conversation. I wish we'd had more time. We didn't get a chance to, we got to the end and Jonathan ended up having to field a lot of these, did a great job with it. So I just want to remind everybody that you can continue to submit comments and we will look at those and keep the discussion going on. I'm just going to give you the address here. It's at eagle-climatesolutions@michigan.gov. We're going to get back together in a little more than 90 days after the holidays and such, February 25th, 1 to 3. In the meantime, let's keep the conversation going on all these topics because we got a lot to sort through. And I just thought it was a really helpful discussion and nice to focus on this one pillar and from many different perspectives across different parts of state government, as well as partners on the outside who are helping us with those efforts. I think I'm supposed to remind everybody, you can access the meeting materials and other resources at michigan.gov/climate. So with that, do we have to take a motion to adjourn or do we just?
I think we can.
We don't need
So
to.
if anybody wants to, yeah. Larry, keeping it up.
Yeah, right.
Okay. Can I get a second for that? I think Lana.
Phyllis gave
Lana or
us.
Phyllis.
I gotta go.
Okay. Okay, any discussion? All those in favor of adjourning?
Aye.
Aye. I'm assuming nobody's against that. Thanks for your time and really appreciate everybody's participation.
Thanks, everyone.
Good to see you in person.
Great stuff.
Thanks.